Okay, we're starting to see folks come on. Cindy, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. We still have 2 more minutes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I will wait for your cue when you get there.
Thank you.
Is being recorded.
It's 6 p.m., Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I see we've got our full council here, our city manager and staff. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm going to open the City of St. Helena regular city council meeting Tuesday, July 27th, 2021. And if our city clerk would like to help us with the remote access understanding and also Spanish language interpretation understanding.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, the public can participate, excuse me, via phone. You dial 669-900-6833 at the prompt, enter the meeting ID, which is 831-3079-3796. Press pound, and during public comment, if you would like to provide comment, you would raise your hand and press *9 to speak. And tonight's meeting will have live Spanish interpretation. To access the interpretation, you will need to use the Zoom application from either your cell phone, tablet, or computer. Instructions on how to use the Zoom app are listed in English and Spanish on the agenda posted on the city's website. Once you join the meeting from the Zoom application, you will see a small globe at the bottom or top of the screen. Click on the globe and you will be able to access the live interpretation. Marcy and Claudia are interpreters this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we'll now move to our Pledge of Allegiance. If folks would mute your microphone and place your hand on your heart and repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And with that, a roll call, please.
I just got, just so you're aware, we're having some issues with channel 28. So Napa TV is trying to get that resolved and up and running, but we are live streaming on our website. So with roll call, Mr. Mayor?
Here.
Vice Mayor Doreen?
Here.
Councilor Chateau?
Here.
Hall?
Here.
And Hardy?
Here.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move to our adoption of the agenda item, and I'll ask our city clerk if we have any changes in this evening's agenda. Well, we've got to mute, you're on mute, Cindy.
Okay, we just have a few. And first on consent item, let me get there. Consent item 9.1, we will only be considering the regular City Council meeting minutes of June 22nd. The other minutes will be heard at the next meeting. Item 12.2 of new business will be heard right after the adoption of consent.
And 12.2 is our appointments. So if folks are online for the appointments to our committees, that item will be heard earlier than is on the agenda. So just so folks know if they want to stick around for that.
And item 9.4 will be removed from consent. So just noting that as well.
Okay, very good. And with that, is there a motion for adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
And a second, please.
I'll second.
Councilor Hardy?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doreen?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. And now we'll move into our public forum section. This is, I just want to take a moment here as we get in. Oh, I'm sorry.
Did you want me to vote?
I'm sorry. Did I miss
Oh,
something?
I'm sorry, Chateau. I apologize.
No
Councilor
problem.
Chateau.
Yes.
I apologize, Councilmember Chateau. So with that, we'll move to our public forum. I just want to make a brief comment as we get into this. We know that water issues are on the front of folks' minds. We have a number of water items on tonight's calendar. And so if the water-related comments may be most helpful when they come when those items are brought up. Some of the water comments may not be exactly specific or thought to be to those items. I do think that they will be able to be better synthesized into the conversation if they come at the point when we get to the water items. But if somebody sees something different in public comment that they feel they need to put forward, we'll be open to hearing that as well. I do want to make the point that I hear words in the community like water wars, and what I would like us to think is in terms of a approach that's peacefully working together for best solutions in terms of water conservation. That's one point I'll make. And then I also do want to point, as we get into our reports and by staff and council, be some reports about sort of where we are in the COVID front coming up then as well. So with that, I will open up the public forum and see if we have any public comment.
We do. Mark, you can address the council. You have 4 minutes.
Yeah, hi, everybody, and I appreciate everything you guys have been doing. It's been a rough year. I would like to hopefully, maybe tonight or in the next meeting, get an update on a few things. I'm very interested in the South Crane traffic calming and bike lane plan update. We haven't really heard much about that since the last time we spoke about it. And I thought the Spring Street bike lanes were supposed to be painted and striped in July, but I haven't seen that, and I'm very interested in getting on my bike and riding around safely through town, especially now with all the blue zone discussions and activity that's surrounding town and getting people out of their cars and allowing us to ride safely. And then third, I'm very interested in Scout Hall. I know there's been a lot of discussion, over the months about Scout Hall. I think there's a draft of an agreement with Scout Hall that's been sort of maybe languishing is too tough of a word, but I think it hasn't moved anywhere in the last couple of months. And Scout Hall, I'm personally involved in some significant donations for the repairs and maintenance of Scout Hall that are upwards of $200,000. And there's a lot of people that have already put money in and would really like to get on with the business. And I understand the contractor is ready to go. And I would hate for us to, get through summer and hopefully a rainy winter and then not be able to make all those improvements on Scout Hall. So it would be great if the Scout Hall agreement could also, get finalized so we can get moving on those things. I'm not a Scout Hall representative or a Scout representative. My kids went through it, but as I said, I've been personally involved in significant contributions of, over six figures. And Scout Hall's got a lot of money lined up. So they just are waiting to do this. So those are a few things that I would love to hear about. Thank you.
Thank you for the public comment. Is there,
Thank you.
are we seeing any additional public comment at this point?
There is. Andy, you can unmute yourself and address the council. You have 4 minutes.
Good evening, Sandy Thompson, 1457 South Whitehall Lane. Council members, this has been without question a very difficult 18 months for the hospitality industry and all of us who work in our community to make it a pillar of our Napa Valley. Lost wages, reduced hours, furloughs. Many are still struggling to get back on their feet, both emotionally and financially. And yet, this body did not receive a proper readout from its liaison of the Upper Valley Waste Management Board's intention to review, hear, and approve an 18% increase for the Upper Valley Waste Services, UVDS. 18% increase is a very material expenditure for many St. Helena residents. Councilmember Chateau failed to brief the council and therefore her constituency before voting to approve this increase at the last oversight board meeting. This is a neglect of her duty to inform the residents of this municipality and a failure to perform proper oversight. To summarize, on June 22nd, at the final council meeting before her vote to hike rates, Ms. Chateau was asked if she had any reports to make through council member comments on the meeting agenda. Anna stated, nothing to report. An increase to all ratepayers over the next 3 years seems to be very material reporting as the council member's official liaison to the oversight board on which she serves, the Upper Valley Waste Management Board. Then, at the board's next board meeting on June 28th, Ms. Chateau made the motion to approve the rate hikes and then promptly voted for the increase. But interestingly, found no reason at all to report the justification of the increase, state her intentions to support the increase, or get input from other council members, those of you on this body, prior to the vote. Merely nothing to report. Now Ms. Chateau wants to be our next leader on the county supervisors representing our district. Is this the obligation and transparency the council member will swear to in her aspired role? Honestly, I wouldn't count on it. But she did appear to be happy to be included in a photo shot on a recent UVDS promotional flyer sent to all ratepayers. Perhaps her obligation and allegiance is to someone else. Additionally, this body should adopt formal procedures for council members to report from the bodies and committees they serve as part of their council assignments. Every public board I've served on has a well-oiled process for ensuring the constituency they serve has information they need to make informed, practical decisions. You owe it to your St. Helena residents. Thank you.
Thank you for the public comment. I will make a note that I submitted a request to the Upper Valley Waste Management Agency, JPA, to consider a method of reporting back. We recently formed a climate action committee that has a method for reporting back to the jurisdictions, and I suggested something similar to the Upper Valley Waste Management Agency, JPA, just to make that note. Is there any additional public comment?
There is no
I'm sorry,
additional
Anna,
public comment.
Sure,
you
I'd
raise
be
your hand?
happy to. I have notes to respond to this in my report out. I can do that, or I can do now if it's helpful, because we do have a way to report out on this and the information shared with the council. I'd be happy to share it tonight publicly and the dates of how this all happened.
Okay, shall we do that in the report out?
Great, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. And so is there any additional public comment?
There is none.
Okay, very good. So now we'll come out and close public comment. We'll go to our reports by staff and city council, future agenda items, and AB 1234 reports. And we will start here with our city attorney and request some information about our July 13th closed session, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. We did have a closed session on July 13th in the morning regarding our existing litigation with Hall Vinland LLC, and there was no reportable action from that meeting. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you. And our city manager, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly related to the COVID topic, the positivity rate is increasing slightly in Napa County, just 1% over the prior week. The 7-day average is just about 5%. It's very similar to the statewide average. And we've invited the county public health officer, Dr. Karen Relucio, to provide the community and the council with an update at our next council meeting on August 10th.
Thank you. And our finance director.
Yes, I'm standing in for April, and I just wanted to remind everyone that we will start reading meters tomorrow for the July water meter reading period. Thank you.
Thank you. And our city clerk.
Nothing to report.
And from Public Works?
No report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. From Planning and Building?
Good evening. Yeah, tomorrow I'll be participating in a walking audit of the downtown on the blue zones. And I do believe, Mr. Mayor, you're scheduled to attend that also with me. So that should be great to get some eyes on the ground and other perspectives on our downtown. Also, I want to give a shout out to the Trails Committee. I attended the Parks and Rec meeting last night and they presented their version of the plan. I know Councilmember Hall was there and it was a great first milestone for the project. And in the months ahead, that will be coming to the City Council for your review and consideration. And then lastly, the zoning code update. We are in the process of reviewing part 2 of the code. As soon as I get the revised chapter back from the zoning code consultant, we'll be scheduling the subcommittee meetings, and we'll need to conclude those subcommittee meetings before we go live with the first public open house on the draft. So that's where we are, but the important milestone there is that I've actually now received all but one of the chapters of the code and had my eyes on it. So, so we're getting there. Thank you. That's all my update for tonight.
Thank you. And we'll move to our police and fire. Do we have any reports this evening?
The police department has nothing to report out. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And we'll move now to our council members. Councilmember Hall.
Mr. Rosa just basically covered my update. I was just going to comment on the good presentation yesterday by the Trails Subcommittee to the Parks and Rec Commission. It'll be coming to the council at a future date once it's reviewed internally a little bit more. It was a great report, great piece of work, and look forward to sharing it with the rest of the council.
Very good. Thank you. And we'll move to Councilmember Chateau.
Okay, thank you so much. So this is when I would do the brief summary from the Up Valley Waste Management Authority meeting, because we had our last council meeting on, let's see, June 22nd. I got the agenda for that meeting on June 24th, and then we didn't have our last meeting. There is a document that we get now emailed to all of our members after, and I sent that on to be shared with everybody, and I'd be happy to go over it tonight. I know that it could have been quite a surprise to see that rate increase, even though the discussion has been going on for a long time, even before my time, I believe. And if there is another way to do it and this council would like to have input, I, of course, am always open to it. But as I've understood, I do the report after the meetings. And so what we did, there's quite a bit here and you've all received it. So what I'll go over is that we did adopt the agency budget for the coming year, which includes about $490,000 in revenue, primarily from a small percentage of the UVDS fees and expenses of about $782,000, including for a half-time person to help with the rollout of SB 1383 organics regulations, investigation into a litter pickup program, and a $300,000 of grants for members projects. The difference between revenue and expenses will be covered by our very healthy fund balance. We did adopt the 3-year UVDS rate of that 17.95% for year 1, 10.95% year 2, 10.30% year 3. These rates are going to support several new programs, replacement of equipment, services for each of the members, funding of the agency, and additional factors. After these increases, our rates, was an important point for me. After these increases, our rates remain less than those charged in the city of Napa. And our next meeting will be hopefully in person at the Yountville Town Hall on August 16th. So these rate increases to me made sense because in the past, the company didn't have enough money to be investing. This is in the past in things that we need to make sure that everything's running smoothly up there for fire safety, for the environment, for all health and safety. And the management has been so much better. And this rate increase is going to help that continue and help us keep investing in the things we need to invest in. Are there any questions?
is there, in the comments that I sent in, just in terms of looking for a structure, as we move into the future, if something like rate increases are going to be considered, is there a, my suggestion or thought was that there's some sort of mechanism to bring it back to the constituency ahead of time for a council to discuss. And so the suggestion I made was to look at that Climate Action Committee structure by which they do a summary that gets back. And so my hope is that when issues like this come up, that we can get a little foreknowledge to discuss as a council. And I'll follow through on my question to the JPA, but that was in terms of what I sent in, was that received? Do you know if that was received?
I was attending the same meeting as you. They noted it.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Okay, so with that, then we will move forward and I will look to Councilmember Hardy.
Nothing to report, thank you.
And to Vice Mayor Doring.
I sent a written update to city to share with the council regarding my my duties as a member of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. In very brief comments, the MTC Metropolitan Transportation Committee has approved a $6 million funding for the roundabouts that are scheduled to start construction in around the spring of 2023, including Rutherford and Oakville. And I've given some details on that project. The company that runs our Vine bus system has been awarded a contract, 5 years and a 2-year option. Total contract is $81,000. The name of that company is called Transdev. And then the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Board made a major commitment with respect to advancing various financing proposals for the Vine Bus Maintenance Facility Project, which is over a $40 million project. It's a significant project for NVTA. We authorized a number of various actions to move that project forward. So there's more details in the written report, but that's it in summary. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just briefly comment. Mr. Prestwich brought up the COVID issues. Well, recognizing that we are not through this yet. There are still challenges. One of the key things to keep in mind is that we are all continuing to work together with all the different jurisdictions throughout the county, all the municipalities and the county. What's really helped us this whole time is consistency through the county. So we're continuing those conversations. So whatever we do will be done consistently with our neighbors and all throughout the county. So for our community to know that our eyes on the many challenges we have, we keep focus on that as well. We had a meeting yesterday with the board chair, all the mayors and city managers. And so that discussion and focus remains as we look at our other issues. I just want to help our community understand that continues as we move forward. We'll get into our water issues in a bit and our other issues. We'll move now to our presentations and public recognitions. I'm sorry, and this will tie into our other efforts towards fire preparedness, emergency preparedness, et cetera. And so we'll move into our presentations. And public recognitions. And this is where we're going to have a Zonehaven presentation by Cullen Dodd, our Napa County Sheriff's Office Undersheriff, and Leah Greenbaum, the County of Napa Emergency Services Officer. I'm seeing both Mr. Dodd and Ms. Greenbaum here, and we'd like to welcome you to give this presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, and members of the public. We appreciate the opportunity to come and speak on this forum because the more information we get out, the better. in April, the Sheriff's Office introduced Zonehaven to our community. May 27th, it went live, and we began to encourage our community to visit community.zonehaven.com. We need to address where we got this from. Zonehaven itself brought a grant to us through the Moore Foundation, and then we got an additional funding through the Napa Valley Community Foundation. And that's giving the county, the entire county, all the municipalities, 5 years of use for Zonehaven with the idea that we would continue to use it. So the basic concept of Zonehaven, if you want to go to the next slide, is three distinct functions. It allows clarity of messaging to the public. Oftentimes with our nixels, as you know, sometimes the people that aren't specifically aware of roads or certain areas have a hard time visualizing where the evacuations or the warnings or the orders may be going on. And going to this website and knowing your zone, knowing a little bit about the area, it makes it very simple to see exactly where the emergency is going on, whether it's in the city or the county. The second thing it does is it allows for accurate communication for our first responders. Oftentimes, as you know, we've brought in mutual aid from other counties and other places to assist us. And when they come into our county or they have to work inside different cities, having the availability of this on their phones, or we can also print PDFs to hand out if we need to go that route. But it makes everything very simple and specific. You can point to something, tell them, hey, this is where we need to go. This is what we need to do. So that accuracy of communication. The third thing it does, and it'll be important for St. Helena and all the cities and the county, but in the emergency operations centers, when you're trying to predict and plan and organize your response to the different potential emergencies that we could be facing, it has that function behind the scenes where we can upload specific data, such as how many structures are in a certain zone, what are the roadways like, and we can push out messaging to the public that's real time through the web-based app and change it, add links, and see a bigger picture of how everything's working and how everything's connected. So one of the things that we really want to make clear is this is not replacing anything. And I know that was a worry to begin with because it is a new system. It's going to take a while for the culture to adapt to it. But this is not going to replace any of our current ways of doing things. I was talking with Chief Hartley last week about it. And, you know, we all have our high-low sirens. We still have the evacuation tags, as does the city of St. Helena. We still are going to use Nixle. We're still going to use all the same things that we've always done. But this is going to help us clarify with the public on this, the specific areas that we need them to pay attention to. This is also a huge partnership because it is a living program, meaning it's only as good as the information that you put into it. And we've been working with the cities to give us information to preload areas into Zonehaven that allow us to be more specific and give better directions. But again, it's only as good as the data that you put into it. In addition to that, it's going to be places like county roads and public works, GIS, the mapping systems. All of this stuff over time is just going to improve Zonehaven. Originally, the sheriff's office brought it on, but as we looked at it and we understood more and more about it, we realized that Office of Emergency Services needed to play a big role and our cities needed to play a bigger role. So moving forward, we do expect the responsibility to be shared throughout the county with all the stakeholders that are involved. We did do a couple PSA, public service announcement videos, which are linked through the sheriff's office and our Facebook page. I understand that there's going to be some more information that's going to be pushed out through your city. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Leah to let her speak on the OES side of Zonehaven.
Thank you, Undersheriff Dodd. My name is Leah Greenbaum with the Office of Emergency Services, and thank you, Mayor Ellsworth and City Council members for having us here today. So I'll just say a few things about the outreach campaign and the implementation through the EOC. Like Undersheriff Dodd said, we're not thinking of this as a dramatic rethinking of the evacuation experience for the public. We Folks will still be receiving Nixle messages. We'll still be utilizing high-low sirens, evacuation tags, in-person notifications as resources allow. The Office of Emergency Services has templated up our Nixle evacuation communication messages in anticipation of this fire season, and we've shared that through the Joint Information Center with public information officers throughout the county. So we've sort of templated up instructions that kind of utilize a hybrid approach where we're making reference to these zone numbers, but we're also describing their geographic boundaries, as you can see here in this example, and we do continue to welcome feedback on that. Oh, and the city is welcome to utilize those templates as well if you'd like to align messaging with us when you have evacuations that impact your jurisdictional boundaries. So the cornerstone of the outreach campaign here, the main tagline is to know your zone. And you should be seeing a lot of messaging collateral around this very soon. But what we're looking for the public to do to understand how to use this important tool is to visit community.zonehaven.com to see the evacuation map. It's very intuitive. You'll just type your address into the search bar, and we really want folks to get familiar with using that website. We want folks to write down their zone number after they get it through Zonehaven. Write it down on a postcard, keep it on your refrigerator, save it in your wallet, save it on your phone, whatever you need to do to hang on to it. We really want to message that folks should be continuing to sign up for Nixle because that's how they'll receive evacuation instructions during an emergency. Stay alert during emergencies, listen for high-low sirens, and just know what your zone is. Get familiar with that number, get familiar with using that website in an emergency. To do outreach around this Know Your Zone campaign, the county's been hosting a series of grocery store outreach events and local events throughout the county with county staff as well as local officials from the city. We're hosting some mini fairs in high-risk areas. We're doing postcard mailers. You can see a picture of them here on this slide. And we really want folks seeing Zonehaven wherever they go. So we'll have NVTA bus banners very soon. We'll have radio spots, and we're really welcome to any and all engagement opportunities to get folks kind of familiar with this website, familiar with their zones. Like Undersheriff Dodd said, we have a PSA that provides a really concise, succinct explanation of what Zonehaven is and how to use the tool. And we're open to any other kinds of collaborations. At these outreach events, we have iPads available and a big printed map so that folks can kind of go up and see what their zone is there on the spot. Like Undersheriff Dodd said, this is just another support tool in our arsenal, and we really want folks to continue their familiarity with the evacuation tag program, with signing up from receiving Nixles from a variety of different public agencies in Napa, and with the high-low sirens. As we know, there's just never too few methods for communication during an emergency. Another thing that you can do to help your constituents prepare for evacuation efforts is to make sure that they understand evacuation terminology. In May 2020, the state standardized that terminology. I think in the past, a lot of different agencies were using the terms evacuation advisory, evacuation alert, evacuation order, mandatory evacuation, and it was a little confusing to the public because these terms mean different things. Now we've standardized the terminology throughout the state. So the evacuation order is that notice to go now, to leave immediately. That evacuation warning is that notice that you should prepare because it could shortly turn into an evacuation order. And for some folks who may require additional time to evacuate, people who have access and functional needs, people who have pets or livestock, it may be time for them to leave now. So the evacuation warning may mean different things to different people depending on their need. This is important because that Zonehaven tool is going to show you whether your area is in an evacuation order or an evacuation warning. So very important to understand how to interpret that information. And with that, I will close up and thank the city for their collaboration in this project. And this is a big step forward for a collective approach to evacuation management. And we're very optimistic that it'll improve operational coordination and enhance communication with the public. So thank you again for your partnership.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open it for council questions in a moment. I did have a question. Once folks punch in the initial connection with community.zonehaven.com and sign up, like Nixle, is that the end of their sort of participation in terms of entering data or information? At that point, will information come directly to them and their device from Zonehaven as Nixle does?
No, Mayor. The concept is that it's living on the website, so it's not going to be a notification tool. That'll still come through Nixle for now, and then going to Zonehaven, community.zonehaven.com is where they can find their zone. And if there is a emergency in that area, we'll be able to update it with real-time information, such as, hey, the area to the south is blocked, you need to evacuate north. And it's just going to be another tool to communicate with, but it of itself is not going to be notifying people, and there's no sign up for it. You're just going to go to this website and use it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Are there additional council questions at this point? Seeing none, I'll say thank you very, very much. These efforts are really appreciated by our community. We're continuing to work forward on things like our Map Your Neighborhood efforts, our Fire Safe Councils, and efforts like this Zonehaven tie in with all those efforts. So we as a community we want to be partners with our local emergency services. We want to know how to do what we do and let you do what you do and not get in your way. I think these tools are going to help us all. So thank you very, very much for this presentation.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move off now and we'll move past our staff briefing. Seeing none, we'll move to our consent items. My understanding is we're going to pull item 9.4. Councilmember Chateau is recusing from that, and so we'll vote on that one separately. So with that, we'll pull that, and we'll now go through the other consent items and look for a motion to, unless somebody wants to pull one of those. We'll start with 9.1, 9.2, and folks can let me know if we want to pull one. 9.3, 9.5, and 9.6. And seeing no hands to pull, I will then ask for a motion to adopt the consent I'm saying Councilmember Chateau.
I did have a question about whether I can vote on 9.6 as well that I didn't ask our city attorney ahead of time. I just wanted to double check that one.
Was this the item that you recused yourself from?
Yeah. The first time. That's why we didn't talk about this one.
Why don't you
pull that one?
Why don't we pull that one too and vote on that separately?
Okay. So we'll call for a motion to adopt the consent calendar with the exception of items 9.4 and 9.6.
I'll move approval of those consent items with the 9.4 and 9.6 pulled.
I will second that.
Okay, is that motion also include amended item 9.1?
Oh, I'm sorry. We had the amendment on item 9.1 where we removed the special meeting minutes of July 13th.
Yes, it does.
Seconded.
Agreed.
As amended.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councilmember Chateau?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. And so we'll take them. Oh.
We're just going to take a moment to let Councilmember Chateau jump off the meeting, and then we will hear items 9.4 and 9.6, and then I will invite her back to rejoin the meeting once we've concluded those items.
And I think the policy is to have a brief explanation as to what the conflict is before you step down, so that the committee can understand that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. 9.4, it's because I have a property that's close enough, since it's a homeowners association, that would fall within the 500 feet. So that's why I recuse myself of that one. And then 9.6, I did not vote on before because of my husband's work at Hall Wines and having a financial interest. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so Councilmember Hall's recused herself. She's off the meeting here. And so now we'll look at our two items. We'll begin with 9.4. This is consideration and approval of a resolution of the City Council of the City of St. Helena setting a public hearing for 6 p.m. Tuesday, September 14th, 2021, to consider objections to the proposed annexation of territory known as 1386 Community Drive, St. Helena, California, 94574, APN 009432025 into the St. Helena Municipal Sewer District Number 1, MSD Annexation Number 140. And this was prepared by Chantel DeLay.
Actually, I will introduce her. She is helping our department as an associate contract planner with some work and took this case successfully to Planning Commission this summer. And so she has a brief PowerPoint to introduce the item, and we're both available for questions. Thank you.
I'm seeing our city clerk. Cindy, you're mute.
So that's actually Chantel DeLay from Public Works. And I don't know if Martine is on the line. This is just a routine, a routine item.
I can speak to this. This is, we're setting the date for public hearing with item 9.4. So we're looking for a motion and a second and consideration of this.
Okay, just to set the hearing, I see. Okay, so we don't have to get into the content. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember
Roll call,
Hardy,
please.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Councilmember Hall,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. And then we'll move to item 9.6, and this is the consideration of a resolution approving a penalty forgiveness program related to June and July 21st water usage penalties. I'll look to the city manager. Do we need any further explanation?
This memorializes the direction provided by the city council to staff on July 13th.
Okay, very good. And with
Can I
that,
offer just a brief comment here, Mayor? I don't know
Yes.
if you're going to open this, but I had a couple of comments that I'd like to put on the record here on this item.
yes, please.
Okay. I just thought that the resolution could be a little bit more clear in terms of the nature of the motion at our last meeting. I voted on it, continued upon three points of direction that we gave to the staff, the city manager, and those were to investigate how to reward customers who've been diligent about conservation, consider adjusting allotments for non-residential customers to make the rations more equitable across customer bases, and ensure that the Water Advisory Board uses objective criteria in determining leak adjustments. In my mind, that's what I voted on, and their condition, that's why I voted. And I would be grateful if we can have that language included in the resolution, just to clarify that on the record, to make a record of it. That's all.
I'm supportive of that.
And all those points were actually incorporated into Councilmember Hardy's motion, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I believe that is
Thank you.
correct.
And then with that, if there's additional council comments, I'll open it to public comment and see if there's public comment on this.
I'm seeing none.
Okay, so I'll bring it back to the council. So with that, is there, and if I'm not mistaken, Councilmember Hall, was this one that you recused yourself from as well?
I did, but no need to.
Okay. So very good. So we'll bring it back to 9.6 and then see if there is a motion on 9.6.
I'll move approval of the recommended action with the amendments that I just stated to the resolution.
I'll second.
Vice Mayor
And roll call,
Doring,
please.
Yes.
Councilmember Hall,
Yes.
Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. Very good. That's our consent calendar. We'll move now to our new business, and we're going to move item 12.12 up. I'm sorry, 12.2 up. And this is consideration and proposed approval of a resolution appointing applicants to the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee, Parks and Recreation Commission, and the Active Transportation Advisory Committee to the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. And this is our city clerk, Cindy Jafopoulos.
Thank you. So we concluded our recruitment for our committees at the end of June, and we still had 3 openings, one on the Parks and Recreation Commission, the ATSC, and ATAC. And so I reached out to applicants that weren't appointed, and they were all interested in being considered for the vacancy.
Just a brief interruption.
Yes.
I think we need to get Councilmember Chateau back, correct?
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh, was that what your hand was up for as well?
Yes.
Okay,
My
thank you.
apologies. I'm asking her to rejoin.
Okay, we have Councilmember Chateau back, and can you hear us? You're back in?
Yep, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, so we're now on our item 12.2. This is the consideration and proposed approval of a resolution appointing applicants to the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee, Parks and Recreation Commission, and the Active Transportation Advisory Committee to the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. And this is our city clerk, Cindy Jafopoulos.
All right, so we have 3 vacancies and we have 3 applicants interested. For the ATSC, we have Catherine McDonald. For the Parks and Recreation Commission vacancy, there's Christopher Warner would like to be considered for that opening. And then for the St. Helena representative on the Active Transportation Advisory Committee to NVTA is Lee Phillipson. And so I'm not sure if any of the if they're attending. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Okay, very good. So what I'll do, unless there are any initial council comments, I'll open it to public comment and see if any of the applicants are attending and want to make a comment, or if there's any other public comment, then we'll bring it back to the council. And the thought is to proceed with one motion to appoint all to the committees that they've applied for. So if there's no council comment at this point, I will open it to public comment and see if we have any of the applicants here or other public comment.
I am seeing no public comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I will bring it back to the council, and I certainly, I'm seeing Vice Mayor Doring with a raised hand.
I do have a very minor concern about the application process. So I'm focused on the process and not these candidates. Are all very capable and they should be approved. But I note that the applications themselves are all directed to the Planning Commission. They're applications to the Planning Commission. And the answers to the questions are really not relevant at all to the committees that they'll be serving on. And so I don't want to be uptight about that, but I think it's better practice to actually get them to update their applications and answer the questions that are relevant to the positions they're seeking. I don't know if that's necessarily going to stop me from voting on them, but I do think we can do better in terms of our process, because the questions do elicit information that's useful for me when I vote on somebody seeking a position to serve on the city. So that's it. Thanks.
Vice Mayor, would you recommend in terms of a policy that we, as we proceed forward, that when we sort of shift over from applicants from one, say the Planning Commission, that as a policy, we ask for a new submittal?
I don't know if we need a formal policy, but that's what I'd like to see. Well, that's better practice. It just makes common sense to read an application that's relevant to the position they're seeking. I don't know.
So if we don't have a formal policy, but some memorialization of that, so that as we move forward and the situation comes up again, there's something that directs our staff to help folks get that new application. Cindy, does that sound like something we could have as a direction? Okay.
Duly noted.
Very good. So with that, thank you, Vice Mayor Doring. And so with that, is there a motion to follow the recommended staff action and adopting a resolution appointing the applicants to the committees? I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and also with that comment from Vice Mayor Doring, I hear what you're saying, and I was so grateful that we had the Planning Commission applicants also be willing to do these other committees with these open positions. I know you have that same sentiment. I can see the thumbs up. It was just great because we know we've had these seats open, and here they are, and they are all very qualified. So I'd be happy to make the motion that we approve all three of them.
I'll second.
And a roll call, please.
Councilmember Chateau?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Hardy?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Okay, very good. We'll move on now to our public hearings. This is item number 10.1. This is a request by John Palmer, property owner, for adoption of a resolution granting tentative parcel map approval to accommodate the subdivision of an existing 2.23 acre parcel into two separate legal parcels located at 1780 Dean York Lane in the low density residential 1 acre minimum LR-1A zoning district. And this is, I see Chantel Power. I don't know if I want to go first to our planning director, Ms. DeRosa.
Yeah, my apologies on earlier introducing her. She's the case planner, contract planner working on this project, and successfully took it to Planning Commission earlier this summer. And we have a brief slide deck to share with you this evening. So Ms. Power, you may go forward with your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Good evening, council members. Let me just take a moment to share my screen. Thank you. All right. All right. Well, we already had a brief introduction of this by the mayor, but I will go ahead and continue. Oh, and I actually see a typo in my in my presentation. It's not a use permit. This is a tentative parcel map and a request for property located at 1780 Dean York Lane, located in the low density residential general plan district and the low density 1 acre minimum zoning district. The subject site is currently 2.23 acres and contains one existing residence and accessory structure. And the proposal is to separate those into two legal parcels, one which would be 1 acre in size, and the remaining portion with the existing structures would be 1.23 acres in size. You can see here from the parcel map, this dashed blue line, that is the proposed dividing line between the parcel 1 and parcel 2 here. You can see the outline of the existing home, which is 3,432 square feet, and an accessory structure in the upper left-hand corner of that parcel is 490 square feet. There's also, I think, another little trellis here that's around, the 96 square feet is actually just a shed attached to this accessory structure, and we do have a trellis here as well. The existing home, as I said, is already fully functional. We've reviewed, and Planning Commission has reviewed the project and determined that the newly created lot line will not create any non-conformities that don't already exist on the site. The remaining parcel is currently undeveloped, and no application has been submitted for development of that site as of this date. So as part of the City Council's, our presentation to the City Council must make a finding that the proposed subdivision, together with the provisions for its design and improvement, is consistent with the general plan, any applicable specific plan, and other applicable provisions of this code, and that the design of the proposed subdivision provides, to the extent feasible, for future passive or natural heating or cooling opportunities in the subdivision as described in the state subdivision map act and any guidelines promulgated by the City Council. So as no development is actually proposed as part of this application, we're really just looking at the creation of the 2 parcels to make sure that they meet the minimum lot standards for the zoning designation and general plan district that they are located in. And both parcels do meet those standards. Any future development of the site that's currently undeveloped would have to be presented to under a formal application to the Planning Commission for approval. So, they would look at heating and cooling up, passive heating and cooling opportunities as part of any development that is proposed in the future. As stated, the Planning Commission did review the project on June 21st at a regularly scheduled meeting, and upon hearing the facts of the proposal, recommended approval to the City Council. With that, I will go ahead and, clicking on the wrong thing. I'll go ahead and end my presentation here with the recommendation that staff and Planning Commission has recommended that the City Council determine that the project is exempt from the requirements of CEQA pursuant to section 15315 as a class 15 minor land divisions categorical exemption, and further find that the proposed project is within the scope of findings and analysis of the 2040 general plan update and zoning code, whereby the allowances for such a proposed subdivision are expressly identified and permissible, and 2, accept the required findings and adopt a resolution approving the requested tentative parcel map. And so with that, I am done with my presentation, and I can answer any questions that the council members may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any initial comments or questions from the council? I am seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth. I see that
our ordinance requires a determination as to whether adequate public services are available. There's some discussion of staff report with respect to water service and wastewater service. And it is clear in the staff report that if and when the undeveloped parcel is developed or an application for development is submitted, that a connection to the city sewer would be required. What I don't see is any indication as to whether or not we would require a connection to city water. So that's a question. Do we, in this circumstance, require a connection to city water, or is that optional?
I believe that the city does require connection to city water, and the existing home on the existing parcel is connected to city water. So this future development of the undeveloped parcel would actually need to be connected to city water.
Thank you. That leads to a follow-up question then, which is this. Am I correct in understanding that in our phase 2, and I'm sure this must be true if it's true in phase 2 for phase 3, water emergency ordinance, that we prohibit new water connections? I just want to be sure that in particular, the applicant understands that it may not be possible to complete a project on the undeveloped parcel so long as we're in phase 2 or phase 3 water emergency. But first, I want to be sure that I understand the application of the ordinance correctly. Thank you.
That is my, sorry. That is my understanding as well. Yeah.
And I'm seeing our city attorney, Mr. Walsh.
Just to respond to Councilmember Hardy's question, that his reading of the ordinance is correct. Currently under phase 2, and if we were to be under a phase 3, we do not allow new water connections, and there would be a requirement for a new water connection for a development on the second parcel that would be created by this map.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. And then just the very last question, Ms. Power, is do you recall whether this was explained or has been explained to the applicant either at the Planning Commission hearing or in prior communications with staff?
Yes, the applicant is aware, and they have had an opportunity to read through the conditions of approval, so they understand.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Are there any additional council comments or questions before I open it to public comment? Seeing none, I will move to public comment, and I'll ask our city clerk if there is public comment at this point.
I see public comment. John, you're unmuted. You can address, or you can unmute yourself and address the council.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. John Webb, 1113 Hunt Avenue. I prepared the application for the owners. This is a minor land division. What appears to look like a good infill project, creating a 1 acre vacant parcel. And to move directly to Mr. Hardy's question, the property owners, I made the property owners very aware of the water situation and the possible lack of connectivity to the city water when the vacant parcel is developed. And I think they've even met with staff prior to filing the application to discuss this issue. So they are fully aware of that. And they are also, I think, on the Zoom meeting if you feel the need to ask them directly. But I can confirm they are aware of that. And as far as the application goes, it is a minor land division. It's pretty straightforward as far as I can tell. We, on the parcel with the remaining residents, we are under the threshold for the lot coverage standards. And so I see no other, I see no other concerns or have concerns about the project. That being said, if you have any questions of me, and like I said, of the owner who's on Zoom, I think, we're here to address those questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being on and for the clarification. Is there any other public comment at this point?
There is none.
Okay, with that, I'll bring it back to the council and see if we have any additional comment or question and entertain looking at the recommended action with looking for a motion on the recommended action from staff if there's no additional comment or question.
So moved. The staff recommendation.
Second.
And with that,
Vice Chair
then
Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Hardy,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Chateau?
Yes.
Yeah. Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Very good. So that was item 10.1. Now we'll move to old business. This is item 11.1. This is a review of urgency ordinance amending chapter 13.04 of the municipal code to address the criteria for initiating phased water regulations and the conservation measures for commercial, industrial, and institutional users. We have this prepared by Dr. Mitz, but the discussion will move forward with Mark Prestwich, our city manager. Oh, and I'm seeing a hand up from Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you. I'm going to recuse myself again. I did the first time we discussed it since my husband works at Hall and that's a commercial user. So I'll leave and come back on.
Thank you. And then I'll hand it over to Mr. Prestwich.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And then I'm going to move to the top here and get us started. So this is a council requested 90-day review of the urgency ordinance amending chapter 13.40 of the municipal code. And this urgency ordinance was approved on April 27th. And this is an overview of the presentation. We'll first provide a little background for context on the water emergency. We'll review the provisions of the urgency ordinance to reacquaint you with those elements, touch a little bit on the residential side as well, although it pertains to the non-residential side. We're going to remind everyone of the adopted water penalty structure that applies to non-residential and residential, and then review the June 2021 water meter reads and usage penalties, the first month in which these penalties have been added to bills. So as a little background, this is an overview of how we have evolved into the current phase 2 water emergency. The phase 1 water emergency was entered into in June of 2020, followed by transition to phase 2 on October 27th, 2020. The City Council worked on appointing a water advisory board after that point in time. And on April 13th, a water penalty structure was adopted by the City Council. And that penalty structure was structured in a way that would minimize penalties for usage that just went over a little bit the allocations on both the residential and the non-residential side, but produce significant higher costs for those that were using 50%, 100% more on their allocation. On April 27th, the Council considered and adopted an urgency ordinance that updated the commercial, industrial, and institutional users methodology due to the seasonal nature of water use. And really, in particular, this was addressed to address the concerns related to wineries and the fact that they use more water in the late summer, early fall, producing the wine, cleaning the barrels, etc. And the prior methodology requested a reduction of 10% over a 4-month winter average, which would have been inconsistent with the way they operate. And as I mentioned, June 2021 was the first month in which the penalties were applied. So the urgency ordinance really touches on two elements. The first is it changed, as I mentioned, the methodology related to how to calculate a 10% allocation reduction. So what this ordinance did was look at allocating a 10% reduction using the same billing period from the three preceding non-shortage years. And for purposes of the June 2021 billing, we're using the years of 2017, 2018, and 2019. So we're looking at the 3-year average of June 2017, June 2018, and June 2019. The second change that the ordinance addressed was water forecasting. So previously, the city was looking at forecasting through the end of the year. And what this did was transition that forecast from a November look to the following May so that we could take into consideration a rainfall season. And for purposes of our analysis, and this is probably a best practice moving forward, it can continue to be calibrated, but we're using an assumption of 10 inches of rainfall, which we consider a very low rainfall year, similar to what we had over the past year. But an average rainfall year would be approximately 30 inches between October 15th and April 15th. And just to touch on the phase 2 residential allocations, these are typically 65 gallons per person per day and 2,500 gallons per month for additional for summer irrigation between April and November. This is the city's adopted water penalty structure. And as I mentioned, the dollars per HCF, that's 1 unit, is 748 gallons. So extra $10 for every 748 gallons exceeded. If the volume exceeded is up to 25% over, and then it gradually increases quite a bit until bin 4, this fourth methodology. If there's more than a 100% overage, then it's $250 per HCF. And here's the calculation for the dollars per gallon exceeded. So this is a brief overview of, we've compartmentalized these June water meter reads. We have 2,424 customer accounts. And so 900 of these had overages. 136 of the 900 were due to water leaks or attributed to water leaks. And so what we'll look at, and this is just a contrast, these are the same bins that we're looking at here, the 4 different categories. So 371 accounts over double the allocation. This is how the water penalties break down by the dollar amount. So the initial takeaway is that 1,525 accounts received no penalties, and an additional 337 accounts, so more than 1,800 accounts, had less than $100. And through the penalty forgiveness program, what that translates to is today up to a $25 additional penalty, a penalty of up to $25. The remaining $75, in fact, the entire 100 can be given with conservation meeting targets in the months of August, September, October, and November. And then we have the rest of these that are probably easier to look at on the next chart. I'm going to turn this into a chart that you can see the same breakdown. So here is another look at that same data. And what this shows us is the range of penalties when we take into consideration the 25% of the dollar amount. So again, these are the 60+% of accounts that had no penalties. These are the ones that were 337 under $100, and a little more because we're looking at 25% of the penalty now, and how that breaks down across the various accounts. That's the penalties distribution. This is a slide we shared on July 13th, and it really breaks down a different way the data from the June 2021 water penalties. So this is the non-residential look. And again, in blue here, you'll see that 65% of the non-residential accounts did not receive a penalty. Another 13% were just over. So more than 3/4 of the accounts were just either under the allocation or just over. And the non-residential water penalties accounted for 12% of the total penalties on accounts in system-wide. I am highlighting the yellow in yellow here, the percentage of accounts that were more than 50% above, and noting that 9 and an additional 4, if we're looking at 50% or more, 13 of the 46 accounts happen to be accounts with leaks. So that's the non-residential look. This is the residential look. Very similar numbers on the no penalty. So more than 60% of the accounts. When we look at the non-residential, it was 65. Here it's 63%. Another 8% just over. And so more than 70% of customers were either under the allocation or just over, with 23% more than 50% and above over. And here are the customer accounts for that. And on the right column, the number of leaks, number of accounts with leak letters. And so 61 of those 340 were attributed to leaks. And the residential represents 88% of the customer accounts with penalties. And so we're happy to answer any questions you have about the urgency ordinance and the implementation of that. And with us tonight, we have our City Engineer, Public Works Director, Mr. Mark Rincon, myself, and our Assistant Administrative Services Director, Mandy Kellogg.
Thank you for getting us into this conversation. And as I mentioned earlier in the evening, this is very challenging. We are in a very serious water emergency. We want to work together with our community, with our large and small users, everybody working together with conservation being the ultimate goal, and how we get there together. We have worked forward from our previous meeting. We have an ad hoc committee consisting of Councilmember Hardy and myself. We'll be able to have some conversation that's moved forward since that last meeting that I'm going to, in a bit, hand it over to Mr. Hardy to sort of lead that. I do want to say thank you to our city manager, Mark Prestwich, for keeping sort of a overarching look at how we're moving this forward. We've been looking at other cities, we've been looking at other models, and working towards a way in St. Helena, not just to balance within our city, but also the connectivity through our region, our county and our region as well. This is, as I said, like the pandemic, this is touching everybody, and we're all going to have to work through it together. So that is at the core of how we move this forward. I'll see if there's any other council comment or question at this point. I'm seeing Vice Mayor Doring, and at one point I do want to ask a question of our city attorney, but I'll circle back to that. First, I'll go to Vice Mayor Doring and then to Councilmember Hardy.
Yeah, just maybe some clarification in light of the comments we've been receiving from members of the public. Frankly, I was expecting for us to hone in on the equity issue. And I don't see a whole lot of that analysis, and hopefully that analysis will come in short order, because that was sort of the intent, at least in my mind, when we passed the penalties in the first place, and then sort of reiterated that at our last meeting. I mean, the question in my mind is first of all, well, a couple questions. Are we meeting our target? If not, why? And then is the burden of conservation shared equitably across all user classes? Yes or no? Those are the kind of questions that I have, and I think the citizens sort of want to hone in on that. Maybe it's premature, but I mean, the fundamental thing is, I mean, the emphasis is what is our target? Are we meeting our target? If not, how can we make improvements, but also maintain equity in the burden? So that's kind of where I want to focus, and maybe others have different ideas, but that's my thinking at this point.
Vice Mayor Doring, I'm gonna hand it to Councilmember Hardy, who I think is going to address a number of those points that you're bringing up.
Thank you. And I'm going to get to those equity-related questions, Vice Mayor Doring, very quickly, but I do want to ask a couple of questions of staff just for some additional background here. I note that we do have a specific provision in the ordinance for dedicated irrigation accounts, but I don't think I've seen anything that identifies how many dedicated irrigation accounts we have. Does staff have that information available? If not, you know, we'll take it at the next opportunity, but that's one question.
So our Assistant Administrative Services Director, I know, is quickly looking for the answer to that question. Perhaps we can capture your second question while she's looking that up.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm happy to take that info when it comes. And then if you could go back, please, to sharing the screen where you showed the summary. You know, you had the table on non-residential penalties where we saw the number of accounts at the different levels of penalty. Okay, I want to see, please, is this the non, yeah, that looks like keep going. We've got one that's just looking at non-residential. There it is. Okay. What continues to catch my attention here is that for the non-residential accounts, the required reduction or the allocation, we'll say the allocation is 90% of the average use in the same month in our 3 prior non-shortage years, which are 2017, 2018, and 2019. So to be 50 to 100% in excess of that allocation means that the customer is using something like 50% more water than was used during that base period, and to be 100% over or more suggests they're using something close to double what was used in the base period. This strikes me as an unusual situation, but we have, after we subtract for the leak letters, we still have that's 22 accounts in that 100% plus, and another 11 in 50 to 100%. It really strikes me that that's a small enough number that some case-by-case inquiry really is in order, because you know, if someone were basically doing the same thing they'd been doing, then I would expect them to be in the first category at 0 to 25%. And yet we have these accounts that are way over that. So that's a thought there. That's really not a question. I suppose that's just something I want to bring to everyone's attention, and that is a request that there be some more particular investigation of what's happening with those accounts. And then I want to go directly to Vice Mayor Doring's questions, as I've been giving this a lot of thought myself, and I'll explain the conclusions I've reached. My mind is open in all respects, but this is what I see. I think to begin with, in order to talk about, in order to frame a comparison between how the ordinance affects residential customers and non-residential customers, we really have to look at and ponder the difference in the structure, because there isn't a direct apples to apples scenario here. For residential customers, we have a fixed amount for indoor use at 65 gallons per person, and then separately a fixed amount for irrigation. And on the non-residential side, we have just a 10% reduction, which I'm convinced, especially when we go back before the urgency ordinance and reflect on the fact that that was a 10% reduction based on prior winter usage. The ordinance that we have looks to me as though it treats all non-residential customers as a situation where all we're concerned about is indoor use. And as though landscaping and irrigation are not a significant factor. And with respect to the indoor use, I think the difference between a 10% reduction and going from roughly 75 gallons a day to 65 gallons a day per person in a residence, that's pretty close. It's not identical. If we use 75 gallons per person per day as the benchmark for normal use, then it looks like about a 13% reduction on the residential side. I think if we go back to some of our historic data, again, based on winter months, and making some assumptions that are hard to confirm about how many people live in each home, maybe it's 77 gallons per person per day. I don't know how solid a number that is. That would imply a somewhat greater reduction, but to my mind, those numbers are close enough. We don't have a big equity issue to wrestle with there, at least not on a real urgent basis. But I see a huge disparity in the way in which we're treating outdoor irrigation, and I am certain that it is simply not true that there are no non-residential customers with substantial green areas that are getting irrigated or that are ordinarily irrigated. And just going through the list of things that are obvious to me, I don't claim this list is exclusive, but that includes a number of city properties, in particular with parks. That includes school district properties where there are playing fields, one of which is right across the street from my house. So it's, in my awareness, it includes a number of church properties with big green areas, again, at least in ordinary times. And I think there's probably some irrigation with city water at least one of the cemeteries. Not sure if that's true for both. There may be other users with significant irrigation going on. We just don't address that in the ordinance. That seems to me is something that can and should be fixed. And I'm happy to discuss that further and think about how we can get the ball moving on that. I looked at how we regulate dedicated irrigation accounts. And again, we don't know yet how many of those there are, there we have a completely different metric. It's 60% of the current reference evapotranspiration rate for whatever's being grown there. With reference to WELO standards. I mean, it's more complicated than that. So it's not based on actual use in non-shortage years. It's rather calculated from standard tables of evapotranspiration rates. I have real mixed feelings about that whole construct, frankly. I have questions immediately as to whether we're actually applying that. Is there anyone calculating that for our current dedicated irrigation accounts? Again, assuming that we have some. That's my understanding that we do, but I haven't been able to confirm that.
Councilmember Hardy, I see a question from Councilmember Hall. May I jump in and see if he's got something here that is tying in here that might be best to be asked now?
No, nothing tying in here. I'll wait for Councilmember Hardy to finish.
Okay, thank you.
So at least initially, I think the most conspicuous way to create some significant improvement in the parity between our restrictions on residential customers and our restrictions on non-residential customers is to craft an amendment to the ordinance that addresses irrigation on non-residential customer properties. And there's more than one way we could do that. And I don't want to take a whole lot of time, musing out loud on the details, but that seems to me a very straightforward way to proceed that has the potential to get us very close to an apples to apples outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hardy. And just so we don't lose the mark on that part of the conversation, I'll look to Mr. City Manager Prestwich. We've got our consultant from Raftelis here. We've got our Public Works Director, Mr. Rincon here. And so perhaps as Mr. Hardy puts forth that concept of how we look at amending outdoor irrigation for non-residential, perhaps our experts can think about how we might consider something like that. And I'm also seeing, I don't know if Mandy has did I see a hand? And then I'll go to Councilmember Hall.
Yes, and just to answer your question, Councilmember Hardy, there's 40 dedicated landscape meters.
Thank you. But then the immediate corollary question is there someone on staff calculating 60% of current reference evapotranspiration rates for all of those accounts?
I don't have the answer to that question. I would need to research that further.
Just forgive me for stating the obvious, but if we're not doing that, then we don't know whether they're in compliance or not. So I'm a bit concerned because that's a very different task from looking at previous billing and making percentage calculations there. And it's also a very different task from adding up 65 gallons per person per day plus 2,500 for the month. So it's a specialized task, and I'm just hoping it's not slipping through the cracks. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. I just want to get back to Vice Mayor Doring's initial question, which is, where are we relative to our target? That's the most important issue here. And then we can get into the question of equity. Is the city conserving or not? We had plenty of forecasts. We had special meetings looking at those forecasts. We haven't seen a forecast since. So, I don't know if it needs to be a new law or tied to this ordinance update. I don't think it needs to be that, but something needs to be on our city website so the community understands here's what we're trying to do and here's how we're doing collectively. Once a month, whatever it is, that would be great to see. Secondly, with regard to the ordinance itself, there's this reference of changing the trigger date from November to May. And I raised this issue once before, and I'll just continue to raise it. I don't think it matters if we actually have a date in mind, a specific date. If we're concerned about supply and demand, we need a rolling forecast that looks at 12 months ahead and does the best we can in terms of estimating that supply and demand balance or imbalance. And if there's ever a point in that 12-month forecast, month by month, that shows that we have a problem, then that should be the trigger point. So it shouldn't matter if it's November or December or May or June. Let's just keep a window out ahead of us, at least a year, and make some assumptions that we're all in agreement with. And at any point there's an imbalance, it should trigger something. I don't think it should be a specific date. Those are my two initial comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. I'm supportive of those comments. I think you've got a good eye from your perspective on that. I'm seeing Councilmember, I'm sorry, City Manager Prestwich.
Thank you, Mayor. So to answer the question on conservation, how we're doing, the shorter answer is we're doing enough, and from enough with an asterisk to avoid moving from a phase 2 emergency into a phase 3 emergency at the moment before the end of the year. So what that does is it takes us the current conservation, which I'll talk to you about in just a moment, the current conservation measures that our customers or those efforts are contributing about a 17% reduction on demand in the last reading. Overall, our system is down our system production is reduced 23% in the last month. And when we forecast out through the end of this calendar year, we do not slip into a phase 3 water emergency, which means that we have adequate water supply, not a lot, but we have enough in the Bell Canyon Reservoir to get us to the rainy season. Now, when we started the conversation on the policy approach to penalties and talked about the equity between residential and non-residential and the way the code was written and still is, we made an assumption based on analysis that we needed a conservation factor of 29%. So when we look at these 17 and 23% numbers, they're not yet hitting that 29% mark. And if they were, we would be setting ourselves up for more security moving into the rainy season. So it's falling short of where we would like to be. But this is the first month, June, where the penalties have been applied. And the penalties, the policy rationale behind the penalties is to help identify opportunities, encourage conservation. So my forecast is that 17% conservation number is going to improve over the month of July and likely beyond. And so I do see us increasing that number closer to 30% that the penalty policy is intended to achieve. When you look at the way that the June bills were broken down, 88% of the customer accounts with penalties were residential customers. The residential rate structure is something that in conversations with Raf Tellis and Kevin Kostowick is here tonight to answer questions as well. 65 gallons per person per day plus an outdoor irrigation factor is something that's consistent in other cities. Kevin can expand on that. And when we look at the non-residential side, there's probably room for a conversation about whether the conservation rules in the ordinance produce enough conservation. Obviously, when we look at the water usage in the city, 60% of the water is used by residential customers, 40% of the water is used by non-residential customers. So that would be, if we were looking at an equal number of customers being subject to penalties, we would expect the penalties to look something like 60-40. But with the penalties in June, the first month of data that we've received, and frankly, it's only been about 10 to 12 working days since that data arrived, and we held a special meeting on the 13th. And then we produced the bills at the end of that week. The numbers broke down to 88% and 12%, not 60-40. So I'll leave that to our council to provide some policy direction on whether you are comfortable with the conservation factors that the ordinance calls for. And if you have additional specific questions about how other cities work through or want to revisit some of the policy conversations that we had earlier this year, we can do that as well.
Thank you. Thank you from the city
And
manager.
actually, I'm sorry, Mayor, I had one additional. In terms of water forecasting, we have been updated. We have a rolling forecast for 12 months, and we're working on converting a internal spreadsheet to a document that would be meaningful to the community. And the plan is to, in addition to publish the data that we have on the water production and the delivery and the meter reads each month that we post once a month, our plan is to add a second page that includes that 12-month rolling forecast. So the Public Works Director and I are working on with our staff on developing a document that can be added to our website monthly. And then in order to also track this important information and not just rely on everyone's need to look at the website to find it, our plan is to bring an informational consent item and place it on the council agenda, probably the second meeting of every month after we've had time to look at the data. And this past month, by the way, we found an error or some numbers from the prior year that didn't align with the current numbers. So we had to do some additional due diligence and analysis to understand and investigate why those numbers are off. But what we would like to do and recommend is that we produce both the current monthly water update, modify that a little bit to also project total annual usage from the city of Napa each month. So we keep a running forecast on not only the accumulated number, but the forecast on how we're doing and making sure that those numbers are achieved. But secondly, adding a second page that includes this 12-month rolling forecast and will show us what the volume is in Bell Canyon and be able to identify any concern about moving from phase 2 to phase 3. We're hopeful that a monthly report will allow us to all keep track of those numbers and be able to answer more questions if there are any based on trends.
I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. Mr. Prestwich, when then can the council expect our first look at an updated 12 months rolling average?
I'll look to our Public Works Director I'm guessing that's probably within 2 weeks, but I want to make sure.
Yeah, I concur. It's something that can be put together, and it's going to be a gross look at consumption, a gross look at as a production. And of course, we could throw in that same curve, so we're not overwhelming people with curves, is to put a Bell Canyon storage curve on that to see how we're doing. So there's simple ways of producing this data and presenting it graphically so we don't overwhelm everybody with numbers.
Thank you. Mr. Hardy, did you have, or Councilmember Hardy, I have some comment at this point, unless you have continued question.
No, I'm fine. I've talked a bunch here, so I'd really love to hear from other council members.
Okay, I'm going to jump in on some of the items that Vice Mayor Doring brought up. First, looking at the equitability issue. I think this place of looking at outdoor irrigation for the non-residential customers is a place that we can look for that. As Councilmember Hardy said, the reduction from the general 75 gallon per person per day down to 65 is about a 13% reduction. And so if we look at that compared to that 10% on non-residential, maybe not a lot of room there, but it's in the irrigation. So I think that focus there is very important. Another concept that was brought up is the trucking of water out of St. Helena for other outside areas, and looking at an ordinance or an urgency measure to prevent that type of activity. That was also something that came out of the work that Councilmember Hardy had done. I think that's going to be very important to look at. One of the things that's important in talking about other cities and towns, Healdsburg is an example. We've had a good conversation with Healdsburg. The 40% numbers that they talk about are aspirational and goals. They are not, that's not mandated. And so the businesses are looked at separately. They have a little bit different makeup over in Healdsburg. It's much more on the residential side, where those are more of the users. What we learned about Healdsburg is that they do not have an outdoor allocation. The people in Healdsburg have a 74 gallon per person per day allocation, and they can do their watering outdoor from that. There's not a separate allocation. So it is different there. And I just think that's important for our community to understand that what they see in the newspaper saying something. With a little more digging in, we find that the measures over there may have some limitations on residential use that are constraining there as well. I want to touch on, and I'll circle back to our city manager, but looking at the idea of how we reward our customers who do a good job, in terms of looking at rebates, in terms of one of the things we've talked a lot about are these flume devices. Is there a way for the city to offer a program that can help defray some of those costs for folks to get one of those flume devices? Ultimately, we want our system to be upgraded to have the kind of meters that can read in real time. But in the interim, is that something that we can do? And then also, I want to make sure to hear from our city manager in terms of the Water Advisory Board, how we get to those objective measures so that as people come in, and I know this week it's really started with the phone calls and folks trying to really understand where we are, making sure we have the water board with those objective measures. So if Councilmember Hardy has a comment that relates to that, or we could take it right to the city manager.
Well, I just wanted to add a little clarification on the Healdsburg situation. First, as you might expect from the fact there's no allocation for residential irrigation at all, they're in a phase 3 situation. So it is a step further. In terms of the ordinance, there's an ambiguity that it's just important to be aware of. In the text of the ordinance, the reductions are mandatory, but they have adopted no penalties. So in the application of the ordinance, there are, as of yet, no consequences for failing to meet the reductions that the ordinance calls for. And so it's really hard to know until we have access to a staff report from Healdsburg City Council meeting, exactly what they're accomplishing. And I don't know if it will be reported with a residential number and a non-residential number, but They did not have any city council meetings scheduled in July, so I don't think I'm going to be able to look at a report and bring back any more detail until sometime in August. Thank you.
So I think where we are is not as far as we want to be, but we're getting there and getting more focused. And so our thought here is that and I'll open up to public comment in a moment here, that looking at that outdoor irrigation issue is where we're going to look for that equity between our non-residential and our residential users. And that's going to take most likely the next 2 weeks before the next meeting, before we can dial in with scenarios. And so I'll look to the city manager. Am I correct in looking that you'll be able to present us with those scenarios?
Scenarios, I want to make sure we're clear on which specific types of scenarios you're looking at, because we can pull data on different types of non-residential user classes and analyze the usage at different conservation levels, for example. And also, I think there's some due diligence on our part, because we're making an assumption that perhaps most of those or all of those have some outdoor irrigation. I think we'll want to do some due diligence to understand those customer accounts. I think the volume of I think the number of those accounts is probably under 100. I'm looking at Andy, but I think the answer is it's about 100 or less. So it may take a little bit of time, but if we make the assumption that they all have outdoor irrigation use, then we can run different analyses on different levels of conservation and what that might mean, both from a water conservation factor and amount, as well as if the water use didn't change, what would that mean for those individual customers? And we would aggregate that data for you.
Vice Mayor Doring, does that help show that this is moving on a path towards where you're thinking?
Well, I think there's some confusion in the public in terms of this simple sort of comparison, 10% versus 43%. And I know it's difficult to explain, the equity issue. I think certainly we need to look at the landscaping issue as articulated by Councilmember Hardy. So yeah, I mean, we're evolving. I do think it's correct to not try to compare city to city, because Healdsburg is completely different, and their regime is much different than ours. So, but we can take the best practices of other communities for sure and try to incorporate them. Really, we just need to keep our eyes on the prize. It's like, this is the target, 30%. How best do we get to that target? And I think you're probably right that the penalties are going to really be telling. They're going to force people, but we need to keep our eyes on that target. I'm hoping that staff can do a little bit more analysis and come back and make recommendations to us. This is the best case scenario, rather than putting that ball in our court. You are the water experts in my mind. You're the managers of the water. We'll make the policy, but I don't have that kind of detail in terms of the nuanced comparisons of each user class to see if they're reaching their quote targets. So more data, more analysis will be better. One just practical question that I've had is the wastewater that we treat right now of sufficient quality to be used to water, landscaping, trees, vegetation in our community? And if so, if there are some people who would like to have some of that water trucked to their property, could we do that?
I can,
as they do in Healdsburg.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Doring. I can answer that. There's state laws that govern the reuse of water. Currently, the treatment standards at our wastewater treatment plant do not meet full, allocation for irrigation. We would have to control it down to where it gets applied. Certain applications are acceptable for the level of treatment we provide. For others, are not. So, in terms of managing that, and how do we fill these trucks? Because right now our wastewater are in ponds. We don't necessarily have the apparatus there to fill water trucks. And again, we're responsible for where it gets applied. So if we just gave it away and didn't track it, then we may be up against state law on that.
But there's some opening there. There's some potential.
There's a slight potential. I don't want to say any gross statements, but there is some potential to keep things green, like median strips, on highways, but we don't have any of those, etc. But in terms of irrigating crops, I would defer that to the exact state law, and most application with the secondary treated water is not acceptable.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is, we've committed ourselves to try to come up with some incentives, some rewards for those who are working really hard to keep their water usage down. And if we could explore that a little bit more, and I understand the regulations. I know that Healdsburg's doing that. Their water must be a lot better than ours, apparently. They have a truck and they truck it to folks who want that water. I don't know, maybe a minimal charge, but it's just something to offer back to our residents who are really doing well in that regard. Maybe on a small scale level. I'm not talking about a rollout of 20 trucks, one truck maybe, or something to explore in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, just for a point of clarification, Healdsburg does treat it to a higher level. They're tertiary treated water. They do distribute that water to irrigators, and they also distribute that water, for cooling water. So they're set up for that. They actually have a fill station as well. So they're a little bit ahead of the game in terms of being able to reuse their water.
And important to note that we are moving forward on our wastewater treatment plant with tertiary capacity. So we are moving in that direction. And I do think that Vice Mayor Doring's point is important. This is water and how we best use it and stretch it. We have to start thinking about. I see Councilmember Hardy.
Yes, thank you. I just, supplementing the staff information there, the state standards are very detailed. And so, until you get to the highest levels of treatment, then it makes a huge difference. And there's a lot of concern, for example, for how the property's used, who's using it. So at lower levels of treatment, you're not going to have the ability to use it anywhere children are playing or congregating. I'm not sure you could use it at all around the residence for similar reason. But there's page after page of detail in terms of specific treatment requirements for different applications. And the good news is that that'll be really easy for us when we make the required upgrades to our treatment plant. In the meanwhile, the challenge that we have isn't that we don't have a source, it's the distance. There's water treated, tertiary treated water available at the Napa Sanitation District, but the hauling cost then becomes the big factor. And I'm concerned that that's just not going to look like an affordable program for us. I'm not sure what affordable tools we have to reward our most diligent conservers. I think we just have to really keep our thinking caps on in that regard, as we don't have all the tools that we would like to have. Thank you.
So with that, I'm going to, unless there's council comment here, I'm going to open it to public comment and look to Cindy, our city clerk, for public comment.
We do have someone with the last name of Wheaton. I will allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and address the council.
I'm seeing a mute still. Mute button still.
So they can unmute themselves and address the council. You have 4 minutes. There's no other public comment. I'm asking the person to unmute themselves. Up. We do have some other public comment. I'm going to go ahead and go back. I will go to the
Circle
next
back to
person,
the
which
first.
is Mark. Yes, Mark Smithers. You can unmute yourself and address the council.
Yeah, hi. I have a few comments. I really hope you've read Tom Belt and my comments in detail, which were submitted to the council. There's a lot of, I think, specific information there with regards to things that commercial customers can do, but I don't know that the city's actually asked commercial customers to do anything specifically. We listed out a number of measures that can be taken by those commercial customers. Beyond the idea that all water access should be created equal and there should be no inequality in water restrictions as residents and businesses have investments in their respective properties and economic interests, what we really want is water conservation. And what we really need is water available to all customers, assuming another dry year. As such, commercial customers must be asked to reduce their water use similar to residential customers. The city has not required any specific water conservation measures or of commercial customers, and given the lack of reduction of water use by those commercial customers, we will likely move to stage 3 water restrictions in the future. This will be a tragedy and affect residential customers drastically and reduce the property values as trees and plants die around their homes. We are in a serious water emergency and need businesses to step up their conservation. At a minimum, you need to consider their operations in base years versus what their operations are now. Focusing on commercial customer irrigation use is an argument that deflects their needs to conserve operational water uses beyond irrigation, which is minimal. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have additional public comment?
I am seeing none. Oh, yes, we have one more that just popped up. Ms. Durbin, you can unmute yourself and address the council.
Thank you, Cindy. I have probably 3 hours of comments. I'll try and get it down to 4 minutes. One is thinking that we're going to be okay next year based on whatever metrics you're using to predict is very risky. One of the reasons Healdsburg is in the dire situation that they are is because Lake Mendocino water is evaporating at a vastly greater rate than they had anticipated. So what they predicted they were going to have available, even without rainfall, and what they're actually looking at are wildly different. And that could happen to us too. Water is water and evaporation is evaporation. I'm not sure when the last time you spoke with the city of Healdsburg was or who you're talking to, but I had a very nice lengthy conversation with the water department there this morning. And they have, first of all, they have mandatory no, for both commercial and residential, no irrigation of lawns whatsoever. So any commercial property with lawns, they are not permitted to irrigate that. Also, the commercial customers are now mandated to reduce by 40%. Furthermore, they sent warning letters out this week for people who have exceeded their allotment, and they currently have a $1,000 a day penalty lined up. So the idea that it's all, you know, loosey-goosey in Healdsburg and they're so different from us and all that, to me is a load of you know what. So, you know, I personally would like to know who are the 22 accounts after adjusting for those who had leaks. We'll take them out. Those 22 commercial accounts that are using 100% or more, who are these people? what is 100% in those 22 accounts? Are we talking 5,000 gallons, 50,000 gallons, 5 million gallons? Who are they? What businesses are they? And how many gallons of water are we talking about? So we have 22 accounts after adjusting for leaks at least 100% over, and another 11 at 50 to 100%. So those 11 could be at 98%. We don't know. But you guys need to start putting some more specific numbers on this, because to say the residents are, 60%, or even if it was 80%, how much water are we talking about with these commercial users? Another thing is Healdsburg is mandating water by request only in restaurants. They're not asking, they're saying that's the law now, or the rule. They're also asking restaurants to retrofit their kitchens with updated devices for their dishwashing machinery that has great water conservation measures. They're suggesting that the hotels ask their clients not to have linens changed every day. They're asking some of the more casual restaurants to have water refill stations. So somebody who first asked for water, got it, wants more water, they have to get up and go get it themselves. So they're actually a lot more proactive than it sounds like you guys are kind of implying. And lastly, it's not just Healdsburg. So why are we focused just on Healdsburg? We've got the county of Lake asking the same from all water users, commercial and residential. Marin County, the city of Santa Rosa, 20% across the board. So as special as St. Helena is in so many ways, we're not that special when it comes to water and water allocations and restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the public comment. Thank you for the comments. Do we have additional public comment?
We do. We'll try Ms. Wheaton again. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Kelly Wheaton. I'm sorry I couldn't answer before. I was having a coughing spell. I have two comments. One has to do with the billing period. And as far as we can tell from our bills, there's a range of between 26 and 33 days. And under normal situation, that wouldn't have much of an effect. But when you're only able to water 2 days a week, and those water days are prescribed, in our case, Tuesdays and Fridays, you can have a month where you might have that happen. Your water days would be much less or much more, and that will affect the amount of your water usage. And I have no way of knowing whether we're going to be billed on a month that is a 26-day month, or it's going to be a 33 or 34-day month. So something in the way of letting us know the billing cycle. When I used to live in a rural area, they used to, for PG&E, send us a list of the exact days that they were going to be using as the cutoff date. That would be really helpful. And my other comment is in the equity vein as well. Our water usage, we cut back last year, and this year we're over 50% reduction in our water usage during the summer months. And it's really hard because I look out there, and even with that 50%, we have lots of plants that are dying, and we've had to remove lots of plants. We don't have any lawn. We don't have a swimming pool. We do have a large lot, but it's mostly in bark and drought tolerant material. Anyway, it's really hard to see that happening at our personal level, and a 10% slap on the wrist for commercial customers. And this parsing of it into, we're going to take a closer look at the landscape water for the commercial customers, or this or that. I don't understand why you can't make a simple 20% reduction for all customers, something that's going to be much more equitable, and you're going to get better compliance on everybody, rather than making lots of people suffer greatly, including some of my neighbors. And the commercial customers are getting a pass. Thank you.
Thank you for the public comments. I'll look to our city clerk to see if there are additional public comment.
There is no additional comment.
Okay, very good. I'll bring it back to the council. I've got some thoughts. Are there any comments, questions now from the council? So the direction that I believe the staff will hear is that we need to, by the next meeting, have some scenarios laid out for us to look at, some options, incorporating the comments that came in today. I do believe that having clear targets and understanding for our community of where we are in getting to those targets are very important. Looking at how we find our reductions on the non-residential side, as Mr. Hardy's been looking into it, and I've been working with him on that. Looking at that outdoor irrigation may be the place where the efficiency could be found to bring that equitability together. City Manager Presswich brought forward in conversations looking at different scenarios of 15%, 20%, 25% possibilities, looking at commercial, and that may be something that can come from that irrigation side. But we know we need to move now as we get deeper into this emergency. And so my expectation certainly is by the next meeting, we have some very solid measures that we can make some choices on, and looking also to what are those measures for the Water Advisory Board, and what are the potential things that we can look at to incentivize or to reward those who do well, including looking at what does treated water look like. All options, I think, need to be on the table at this point. Councilmember Hardy, do you have any thoughts as we move forward here?
Well, again, my mind's very much open to other ways of looking at things than the approach I've taken. I've always, last couple of months, I've been working with the ordinance we have and trying to make it better. I'm still thinking that way in terms of what I proposed tonight, but what I haven't done is challenge the structure that we have. And that is a structure that takes a different methodology in looking at residential cutbacks from the methodology that's applied to non-residential. The approach that is suggested by some of our water customers and citizens is fundamentally different. That's take a percentage and apply it to all users the same. A lot of analysis would have to be done before we would know what that meant in terms of conservation targets. All the analysis we've done so far in terms of where we are and where we need to be is based on the current structure. It can be done, but I want to add some additional concerns that are very much on my mind. Although we are appropriately and I think intensely focused as a council and a community on the water emergency, for years now, we've also been exhorted and have made some real commitments to revitalizing our downtown economy, towards protecting our businesses and their employees through the pandemic and the lockdown. And we're right at a moment where our visitor-dependent businesses are experiencing a resurgence of traffic and customers, and that's fairly recent. I think, you know, most of that surge began in June when COVID-related restrictions were relaxed at state level. I think it's really important to recognize that big across the board cutbacks for the commercial sector will inevitably force some businesses simply to reduce their volume of business. Every situation is different. It's one of the difficulties with taking a simple across the board number and applying it to all situations. Different businesses use water differently, have different kinds of options for conservation, different levels of investment required to achieve greater conservation, different resources financially with which to accomplish it. So we're likely to discover, if we make a wholesale change, that we've just traded one set of issues for another. But you know, my mind is open. If we can see a way to do it differently, I don't have any objections to that at all. But I'm going to go back to what Council Member Hall said, and I've heard it echoed here tonight, I think by Vice Mayor Doring as well. And I'm not sure actually who said it first, but the most important thing is, where are we? And are we where we need to be? And if we're not, how are we going to get there? Because the one thing I'm really sure of is that if we go into phase 3, that's bad news for everybody across the board, residential and commercial. And that is a bad outcome for all of our water customers. And so it's really important that we find a way, if at all possible, to do well enough in phase 2 that we can go through another very low rainfall year. And I know some projections have been run with 10 inches of rainfall as the basis for the projection. Can we get through a winter like last winter and without triggering phase 3? To me, that's sort of the question that is built in at this moment into looking at a rolling 12-month average. And you know, assumptions do have to be made about supply. The rainfall assumptions get baked into what we think is going to be in Bell Canyon. We've been assuming that we get our 600 acre feet from Napa, although we know that didn't work out the way we expected for the past fiscal year. We're looking for opportunities to make some of that up in the next fiscal year. And another factor I think everyone should keep in mind is that one of the problems with a phase 3 type scenario or some other change in which we push hard on businesses using water is that inevitably we will be seeing increased demand on the aquifer. There's a lot of balancing required to minimize the adverse impacts and keep us all in, you know, deliver a reasonable amount of water to everyone, because we have environmental consequences. If there's a big increase in demand on the aquifer, we have economic consequences if we essentially reduce the volume of business that people can do. It's not a simple thing to create an ordinance that accomplishes that. In fact, it's nearly impossible. So
Councilmember Hardy, Sorry.
Those are concerns I'd like for everyone to keep in mind, and I really want to know what everyone else on the council thinks. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm seeing that we forgot or we missed somebody in public comment. So I'm going to quickly reopen public comment. And we have somebody with a hand up.
All right, Pam, I'm going to go and allow you to address the council. You can unmute yourself and you can go ahead and unmute yourself and address the council.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. You know, obviously this is hard and there's a lot of moving parts, but I just want to throw out a couple of appreciations. One, to Eric Hall about we need to look forward. We need to make sure we've got water into the future, not just until the rainy season comes, because the rainy season may not come. So we really need to, and I think that's what you were just referring to, Lester, as well. We really need to make sure we don't go to phase 3. And then to Paul, in terms of equitability, everyone's focusing on this percentage thing, and it goes deeper than that, really. You know, I think we all just know what we know, and we've all just, you know, we know what we've lived and what our point of view is. But when you start talking to other people, we've let our lawn die. We don't have toddlers in our backyard anymore. So it hasn't been it's kind of tough to look at a dead lawn, but you know, you do that. But I was talking to a friend who said that people that live in apartments in St. Helena with children, they have nowhere to play. There's no green grass anywhere, public spaces. And her comment was, couldn't we have one park with green grass? You know, maybe we could use some of that gray water for Miley Park, or maybe that's not possible, or maybe we could turn that irrigation back on. The other kind of appreciation was to our new public works director, who, by the way, I really, really, really appreciate how clearly you speak, how succinctly, cogently, clearly, you know, you clearly have a grasp on things and are able to communicate that. And I really like it. But also just your comment about we can run the numbers, because as a retired CPA, you can run the numbers. You guys are delving into details and that's great. You know, every situation is different, but I heard someone say, or I read it somewhere, that all lawns are not the same. And if little children are going to be running on lawns, then those lawns are valuable. If the lawn is in front of a winery, then maybe that lawn needs to go. You know, so there is devil in the details. I do understand that, but equitability is not just percentages. And so while Mr. Riccon can run the numbers, hopefully for you all, let's get to gallons. Let's get to water. Let's stop, you know, talking about this percentage of customers did this and that. We need to know the gallons. You know, we really need to know that we're going to be okay with water, that all of us who have ripped out shrubs and let our lawns die and are hoping our trees don't die have not done all this for naught. And so, you know, I'm counting on the numbers guys to run the numbers and be honest, you know, really be upright, upfront, and really, you know, be fair, and to look at uses, and everything isn't about money. And so I'm kind of rambling now, but just thank you to Paul and to Eric and the new Public Works Director for your perspectives, and hoping for the best outcome for everyone in town, because I think we're all created equal, as I recall. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the public comment. We'll see if there's any other public comment before we close that.
There is no other public comment.
Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council. We've got to move on. We have another item to get to. If there's no other public or council comment or question at this point, Mr. City Manager, do you feel you have direction over the next 2 weeks to push forward on some things?
No, unfortunately, I'm going to need a little more clarity on a couple of items, but I just want to walk through some notes that I have, and then we'll make sure we clarify the council's direction. Number one, there's a question about irrigation accounts, and we're going to look into those and make sure that the methodology and the billing is accurate. So that's one issue that I have clear direction on. There was a mention of a possible consideration of prohibiting trucking water outside the city. So it will be helpful to understand if there is council interest in that and in what form. So one of the questions would be, is there an expectation timing wise to bring back an urgency ordinance concept to address that concern? And if so, what timeline? I don't know if we should pause after each of these or whether we want to take them all in aggregate.
Well, if I may, my own thought, I don't know why really, was that the well-related issue fit better into the water security item. So I wasn't thinking to give direction on this item, but if Mr. Presswich, if you think it fits better here, then I'm happy to at least provide my thoughts about that.
And I certainly think there's an urgency to it. So if this is the place for that discussion, wherever you think, Mr. Presswich.
Either one is fine. So we can cover it on the next item or this one. A third question is, I know we had conversations about additional analytics related to the non-residential customer who has, and looking at those accounts that have irrigation, and we talked about it, examples of that, schools, churches, city, cemeteries, and we can bring you back options at potentially the next meeting on August 10th and present some additional detail to you, talk about what the additional volume of water that may be reduced through additional conservation options. One of the questions would be, would you be interested in information first, or information and some form of an ordinance that would allow that to be implemented?
In my opinion, we need to have both. I think we need to be ready to move quickly. So if we can organize the information with options and potential action, that is certainly what I would favor. We'll see where the council is on that. Mr. Hardy, Councilmember Hardy.
Thank you. In terms of coming back with an ordinance, then I think the council has to have some discussion about what the methodology would be for this new restriction. Just as an example, is that a percentage reduction or is it a percentage of prior use, which would fit into some parts of our existing framework? Is it borrowed from the existing restriction on dedicated irrigation accounts and thus referencing evapotranspiration tables? I don't see how we can expect staff to bring back an ordinance ready to go unless we've got some more specificity into that.
Okay, so I think what we'll plan to do is bring some data back to you on non-residential accounts, aggregate that data, and I think it probably would be helpful for us to work with the water ad hoc representatives for any questions on that front in terms of the data presentation. I do want to note that we do have information on the water metering days. And I looked for it myself. I didn't quickly find it, but our Assistant Administrative Services Director says it's there. And I think we agree that we can make that and provide that, place that information in a more visible location on the water emergency website. So we'll make that front and center so people see the days that that's going to be, the meters are going to be read. And then at our next council meeting on August 10th, we will likely have updated data for usage in the month of July. It's going to be a quick turnaround. So we are beginning meter reading tomorrow. Is that right, Mandy? meter reading begins tomorrow for the month of documenting the month of July. So we'll be presenting that date. We'll be likely to have an updated figure for you on conservation relative to June. So while the historical averages water increase, water consumption tends to increase from June to July, it will be interesting to see how this compares with prior years after a second month of data is collected. And then in terms of, I mentioned that we had some recommendations on reporting not only the 12-month rolling average, but updating the document that we have today on forecasting for City of Napa water usage. So I don't think there's going to be any concern about us moving forward on that. I would just, our plan is just to move forward, and we'll bring you that. If we are able to present some examples of what that would look like and receive some feedback at the meeting of August 10th, we will plan to do that. So our real takeaway is we're going to bring back some numbers on the 10th with some look at the non-residential accounts that have irrigation, and further investigate the irrigation accounts.
And as a water ad hoc committee, we'll be available, to work with the staff so that we can get everything pushed as close and as far along as we can by that next meeting. Okay. So with that, you have direction, and we can, barring any further council comment, we'll move to the next item, which is the, I'm sorry, I'm looking at Councilmember Hardy.
Yes, I'd like to propose a 10-minute break.
Okay. And we'll.
And I'm going.
Yes.
And I'm going to invite Councilmember Chateau to rejoin us.
Okay. So we'll come back at 8:42, and we'll have Councilmember Chateau back with us. Cindy, are you able to hear me?
Sound great.
Okay, we're looking as the council comes back on. It looks like we've got everybody here. We've got our city manager. We got moving into 8:42. So are you ready to get rolling, Cindy?
I'm just waiting for Lester to come back.
Let's roll.
Okay. We've got our item here. We have this is item 12.1. This is our discussion and direction regarding our draft City of St. Helena Water Security Framework. This is our city manager, Mark Presswich, will get us into this item. This has been an ongoing project. First worked with Vice Mayor Doring on this, and then transitioned to working with Council Member Lester Hardy on this. So City Manager Presswich, if you can take us in here.
Thanks, Mayor. Mark Rincon was not here early enough for me to work with him earlier on this project. So I'm going to take the lead tonight. And this is a follow through of a conversation that the council had on February 23rd, 2021, when you received an informational update on St. Helena's safe yield analysis, related water emergency regulations, and the city's water neutrality policy. We also provided information that evening related to projected water loss, the Bell Canyon Reservoir capacity, water supply and usage trends, water reduction incentives, and water customer usage and data. And at the conclusion of the meeting, the council directed the city manager to work on preparing a comprehensive water security strategy for review at a future meeting. So we had a really good conversation that evening. And as a result, there were a number of ideas that we began to organize. And what we're presenting to you tonight is essentially version 9 of that effort. We've been working to evolve this over time and refine it. And so tonight, the draft comprehensive water security framework is being presented as an effort to really coordinate all of our city's efforts on the water front. And so that includes looking at customer needs, advancing essential water infrastructure projects, addressing evolving regulatory requirements, and stewarding our ongoing water security efforts. And we know we have a number of initiatives underway. This framework includes more than 65 different initiatives. Many of those are infrastructure projects. And we've organized the framework into 6 different sections. The first is maximize conservation during a water emergency. Second, enhance city water supply and delivery availability. Third, improve consumer satisfaction and confidence. Fourth, establish and update water policies to improve water source security. Fifth, advance data analytics and analysis to improve performance. And sixth, invest in capital improvement projects that strengthen the city's water infrastructure and enhance reliability. So I've worked with our Director of Public Works, and I want to share that the staff report refers to conceptual implementation framework as well. And I'm going to share my screen and share with you a document that will serve as the source of how we walk through the presentation tonight. So this is, we've taken the document that's included in the staff report, and we've organized it to include columns C, D, and E here at the top. Is everyone able to see this screen?
Yes.
Okay. So what we'll do is we'll just walk through each of these, and I won't specifically read each individual initiative under the various sections, but I do want to have us take a look at the column C, D, and E, where we've either applied an ongoing reference to a particular task, documented this as a short-term initiative defined as sometime and then up to the next 24 months, could possibly underway now, and long-term, which is we're defining as 3 to 5 or more years, but really targeting the 3 to 5 year time frame. So this is, while all of these are short-term or ongoing, and I will refer to short-term as essentially ongoing because of where we are with the phase 2 water emergency. This is one of the sections in this framework, along with different initiatives. And so what we're looking for tonight will be feedback on what you see here in terms of how it's organized. Is there something that needs adjusting? Is there something that's missing? Is there something that doesn't need to be here? Any council comment or feedback on the implementation timeframe that we're envisioning? And this is really a first look at this. So not even the water ad hoc members have had a chance to look at the timing associated with this. So this is a first look at that. So this is the maximizing conservation during water emergency, and there may be other initiatives that get added to that. When we look at enhancing city water supply and delivery availability, number of initiatives, and one of the trends I will say, after we did this exercise, the takeaway for me is that we have a lot of either ongoing or initiatives that we have an interest in completing within the next 2 years. And it does raise concerns about our capacity, and we'll address that at the conclusion of walking through this. But you'll see a trend here that a number of these initiatives we see as near-term needs and have a strong interest in accomplishing within a short period of time. So you'll see how this breaks out, some which perhaps are longer-term initiatives under enhancing the city's water supply. And as I scroll down here to improving customer satisfaction and confidence, again, all shorter near-term activities. And I'm going to pause just so everyone can read those. The fourth section is establish and update water policies to improve water source security. And we have a number of 1 to 2 year items again on this area. And so we're just organizing all of the various policies that we know are on our work plan. This is essentially a work plan for all of the water initiatives. Data and analytics is a really important focus as well. And we have interest in advancing these initiatives as well. We see many of these are commitments that the city has made that we have a strong interest in following through on.
I'm seeing Vice Mayor Doring with a hand.
Well, I can wait till the presentation's over.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. And a few more at the bottom here. And then in section 6, these have already been prioritized by the Public Works Department. We've had prior conversations about our CIP projects. They all are on different timelines. The projects in green here are considered high priority projects. So these are higher priority projects than the other projects that are listed below. The second priority and third priority. Now, there are examples. So for example, row 83 here, the Dwyer Road Boost Pump Station. This is a project that we are prepared to support. And the city of Napa has an active hazard mitigation grant program application in on this particular project. So while it's listed as third in priority, it's not something that we're actively working on right now. And several of these others in priority 1 are in some form of advancement. So this is an outline of the water security framework that we've put together that's attached to the staff report. In terms of our ability and really the staff capacity, the organizational capacity to advance these initiatives, I think one of our challenges is how do we support the delivery of these initiatives and projects. And with our new director only having been with us for about 3 to 4 weeks now, he's had an early opportunity to look at our department, has some good ideas about the staffing resources needed to support this. And I think one of the next steps for us is to work together on developing some strategies on how we support the delivery of these initiatives within available funding resources. And so we know that on September 14th, we're bringing back a council conversation about what does the current sales tax and hotel tax revenue trends look like. That date should provide us about 3 more months of data on what's happening with our business recovery, our financial recovery. And then in addition to that, there's also council direction to bring forward options related to the fire department. And what I really see is an opportunity to bring all of these conversations, those 2 I just mentioned, along with strategies on how we support the delivery of these initiatives moving forward at that same time, and have a comprehensive conversation about all of these issues, including the water security framework. But we're hopeful that what you see here today is a very good start at beginning to organize the various initiatives. And this implementation spreadsheet is a way of also presenting accountability as we advance these projects, and an opportunity to report out on progress. So let me pause there. I'll be happy to share the screen again when there are questions.
Thank you. I'm seeing Vice Mayor Doring.
Thank you, Mark, for that presentation. I'm glad to see that the prioritization of the infrastructure projects was broken down even further. That was my first response. Too many 1s and too many 2s. We need to have some 3s. So we tighten up the 1s and the 2s. And I would, first of all, excellent work. I'm thinking that we may need another category here, because I'm not feeling entirely comfortable on the 1 to 2 year sort of delineation. There are certain things in my mind are sort of urgent, and maybe that's the category. You know, we obviously have some issues with delivery of water from Napa. To me, that gets up into the urgent area, like now, not, you know, I understand 1 to 2 years means now generally, but I feel more comfortable if we could sort of prioritize some of those issues that we spotted over the last several months. Even the issue of capacity to get these projects done should be listed. And maybe we've got to start funding some staff here so we can get the job done. We need to start working or outsourcing it, you know, whatever way we want to approach that. That actually has to be a priority, and it should be listed somewhere, frankly. And then I would just offer this. I don't know if it's helpful, but the letters as opposed to numbers on the basic items that are listed. I'm wondering if we want to go through the exercise at some point over time to prioritize those, so we all kind of know, even though it may take this amount of time, we know they're under each of those lists, and maybe they're all important, of course, but some are important, more important than others. And I'm just thinking, just in terms of, you know, the water shortage we have, we can certainly figure out, oh, we need to figure out how we need to improve our delivery system, for example. And there's others. The will serve letter, you know, it's sort of been dragging out there for a while. And to see that as a 1 to 2 year, you know, that makes me a little nervous. It's like, no, that should have been done yesterday. So hopefully we can go through and fine tune some of these to hold ourselves, all of us, our council and staff, accountable for the work we're doing. So those are my initial comments. I think it's a really good framework. It's not a plan, but it is a good framework to keep on task, basically. I know you love charts, so I appreciate the fact that you put those 3s on there at the end. So that's very important. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other council comments? I have a few comments. Any council comments here at this point? So I'm seeing Councilmember Chateau.
Thank you. I had a question too. I wanted to ask about that the analyze both future supply and potential demand for water, recycled water. So that one that I thought that also went with G, the develop recycled water distribution system. I saw that that's the long term tonight, Mark, when you put that up on the graph. And I was just wanted to know, would that be different from purple pipe? So when projects and opportunities come up, my question is, would we still be pursuing those and encouraging people to put those in when they can, when projects come up, that's separate from us doing the distribution system?
Yes, Councilmember Chateau, absolutely. The purple pipe doesn't go away in terms of reuse. Actually, it would help us get the water out of our system and into positive use, which would be irrigation. The problem is that during the winter, we don't have a lot of irrigators online willing to take the water. So we either have to store it or do something else. And in terms of future reuse possibilities, the state has published they published in 2019 rules for portable reuse. And so that is also an option further down when the state starts to take the next step and actually allow systems to go ahead and start to put the water to direct potable reuse or indirect potable reuse. As you know, in Southern California, they already established many systems where they recharge their groundwater basins with, tertiary treated or advanced treated water, and they inject it into the groundwater as a storage, as a reservoir. And they call it a barrier against the sea, but in reality, it's being reused by the local agencies that consume groundwater in the area. So it's happening now. It's just that the law is being clarified on that, and hopefully within, they've been studying it now for 10 years at least. Hopefully we'll move to the point where it will be like the state of Texas, where direct potable reuse is reality, and we start to recirculate the water.
Okay, thank you. This is excellent. Oh, can I make my one comment, Mayor?
Yeah, yes, and I think we need to ask for just a few more minutes from Cindy with a vote.
Oh, okay.
And shall we do that first, then we'll circle back to your question? Can we get 15 minutes and we'll try to get it done under that? If there's a motion on the council that would support that.
I move for another 15 minutes.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Chateau?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doreen?
No.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Okay, so we'll circle back to Councilmember Chateau.
And I will be really quick. Okay, so I think this is excellent. I appreciate it. When I see this list, I think we need to do all of these things as quickly as possible. And my big concern is, how are we going to pay for it? So I would like to see that strategy and have that conversation about how can we pay for this.
Thank you. Any other council comment? I'm seeing Councilmember Hardy.
Well, I need to be quick here. I have some very specific related projects that are maybe referenced, some of them, but I want to give a little more detail, at least in terms of what I think we can and should be doing as soon as possible. I've already discussed this with City Manager Prestwich. Mapping water use, I think we would benefit greatly, both in terms of water conservation planning and understanding potential recycling demand. If we had a consultant prepare a GIS tool that would integrate data on actual water use so that we could see where the use is located geographically, and thus understand where to target both conservation efforts in terms of properties and customers, and also where we get the biggest bang for our buck in terms of developing purple pipe infrastructure. Where's the greatest potential demand? Related to that, I think we really need, again, as soon as possible, to retain a consultant to assist our Public Works Director with some preliminary planning for recycled water distribution. Understanding potential demand is part of that. I see 3 potential uses, all of which have real benefits for water supply. One, of course, we want to replace city water anywhere we can with recycled water for irrigation. There's also a real benefit to us if we're able to find customers who replace groundwater use with recycled water for irrigation, and some understanding of the feasibility and the costs associated with systems to recharge the aquifer would be very helpful. And I want to take a special note of Mr. Rinken's comment about the role that storage plays, since actually our peak wastewater generation, ironically, is in the time of year when there will be essentially zero irrigation. So how much can we store? But the sooner we understand the metrics of recycling water, the better shape we'll be in terms of our water supply planning. Third, I feel we urgently need to update our safe yield analysis, as unless we have the ability to more accurately project rainfall and runoff into Bell Canyon, we're at constant risk of being late, triggering our water emergencies, and basically overestimating our supply moving forward. And finally, there's been a lot of discussion both locally and countywide about movement of water to supply properties that have run short. And we have at least one, perhaps more, but at least one local property owner who's filling trucks with groundwater for export to another property outside the city limits. I looked at a San Luis Obispo ordinance that actually tracks Sigma very nicely, and under water emergency conditions, export of water is banned. I think that should be something we do in an urgency ordinance. We really need to be proactive in managing groundwater in the city of St. Helena. And I think under our phase 2 and phase 3, we should be prohibiting new well permits except for hardship or emergency. So I am hoping that that's something that can be brought back to us, if not at the next meeting, then the meeting after. I'm happy to discuss that further with the city attorney, hoping for council support on that now, if possible, but it may be better to have some outline brought back. Interested in comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll look to Councilmember Hall now.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick comments. I know we're short on time. I just, I think we're all seeing the relative timing on some of these things. I always want to put an emphasis on addressing supply, if there's a way to do it more creatively. Councilmember Hardy just mentioned banning new wells. I think the county itself publishes data on the aquifer that shows 250,000 acre feet that is continuously recharging. Not that we want to drain all of that, but our city uses 1,800 acre feet, and that's a drop in a bucket compared to what's below us. So I think if we're going to not tap what's below our feet, we better be clear to the community why we're not going to do it. So all other sources look like they're dried today. The timing on the supply side, I mean, the issue is we don't have water. And a lot of the emphasis I saw on timing is looking at how to conserve or do more studies and research. I would rather we look at finding ways to get water here from our neighbors. That would be my area of emphasis and my message tonight, I guess. We need supply. I agree 100% with Nancy Durbin and her opening remarks that hoping that we have another wet winter is a very dangerous way for us to operate. I'm not at all comfortable with that. I don't think we need to do a lot of studies of Bell Canyon. We just need to adopt a policy that says we're not going to draw 50% of its capacity each year like we've been doing. Let's just say we're only going to draw 20% and extend the life of that thing 4 or 5 years, and then look at the gap of supply of what we need. It's 400 or 500 acre feet. So there's a target. If we go focus on finding 400 or 500 acre feet, we get it brought here somehow, or we tap what's below us, we should be okay. Even if we get a little bit of rain, we're still going to be in this issue with Bell Canyon on an ongoing basis. We need to understand that reservoirs moved from a primary source for the city to what should be absolutely a reserve only. That's it. We don't touch it. That becomes our storage place in the future if we can figure out how to get that done. But it's low right now. We should dredge it. We should at least spend a couple of bucks on a bathymetric study and see what sort of sediment has drifted down to the bottom of it, and see if we can get that dredged out right now. If it does rain, then great. We have more capacity there right now for next year. So anyway, I think the supply side of the equation here needs more emphasis. It's quite a list that's been put together. It's pretty incredible. So thanks to all the work that's gone into it, I just think let's hit supply harder. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. And I'll jump in quickly. I want to just say thank you. This is really great to see this come to shape. Something I've been advocating for since first looking at the water system here is that we need to understand the inventory of concerns, vulnerabilities, and opportunities. One thought has been to look at our council. It's also our water board in a sense. Do we want to think about quarterly meetings just focused on water issues or something like that? Also, the recommendations from LAFCO for looking at a unified system around the county may give us some economies of scale, also help with some of those supply issues. Certainly the conversation about groundwater and surface water between the county and the cities and municipalities, how we've traditionally done it. I think we need to relook at that. The water, whether it's on the surface or the ground, is a shared resource. Vice Mayor bringing up a section called urgent, I think is important, particularly I'll use the will serve policy. If we have an urgent section on there for those things that need to move more quickly, I think it's very important. The conversation, as I said, on a unified system also does tie into that, being able to look regionally for supplies. Our neighbors, our municipalities and jurisdictions that we can all work well together with. So I do think those regional conversations, so we're not just looking at ourselves in a bubble, are very important. Those are really my comments tonight. And I'm seeing Councilmember Hall, and I'll take your question, then I got to open public comment. So Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. You just remind me. Thanks for your comments there. I support everything you said. You know, looking regionally, it's strange to think that we're literally dying on the vine here without water when we've got Hennessy right next to us, Berryessa, an aquifer, and other sources of water that are literally nonstop bubbling out of the earth around us. And they have been for hundreds of years. And those have so far been unimpacted by this drought. So a lot of the Berryessa and Hennessy issues, there's a lot of water there. This is a political issue. And so I support what Mayor Ellsworth just said about let's think regionally, how do we balance supply and demand across the board? And it's going to be up to this council as the water board to get out and shake some hands and knock on some doors and figure out how to get into conversations and start finding a political solution to some of this. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the comments. And so I'm going to open the public comment. And I'll
There
look
is
to our,
public comment. And
okay.
Mark, I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself and address the council.
So I think the water security issue is rather urgent, and I don't see that the city is actually addressing urgent needs of the water security. And I would remind everybody of a number of issues that were or opportunities that were brought up, which was, asking businesses and the city to convert all urinals to waterless systems, convert all toilets to 1.5 or less gallon flushes and confirm it, asking, all, signage for conservation and water use in hotels and spas, signage requesting hotel guests to not require fresh linens every day, requiring all spas to tell their health club members to forbid using them for just showers. Many people in town actually go to their health spas and shower at the health spas and not go shower at home. Limiting fleet vehicles and truck washings for many number of businesses in the city limits, or using city water to wash only once a month. Eliminate hosing down outside areas, concrete pads and whatnot for businesses, and whether that's, Godfrey Refresher, Sutter Home, Behringer, Krug, they're all washing down their outside tanks and whatnot once a year, and to ask them to stop doing that. Reduce outside landscaping for all these businesses by 40%, which is 43%, which is what you're asking residences. Reduce vineyard irrigation by 43%. Many old winery, vineyard guys tell you that every vineyard in the city's limits and the Napa County are being overwatered. And that's why they drop, 2 tons every year in their crops. Stop no-tilling, stop tilling vineyards. I mean, it drops all this dust all over our cars, our houses, the winery tanks. So there's no specifics to the water security issue. And I think you need specifics, and you need specifics now for these things. I think dredging of Bell Canyon is timely because we don't have, there's not a lot of water there. Some of you may not remember this, but 30 years ago, we could fish Napa River. We could fish Sulphur Springs Creek. We could fish Heath Canyon. I mean, we could fish all these rivers and streams around around St. Helena, and we can no longer do that because of all the wells that have been dug. And here near my area, there, one neighbor up dug, they went from 300 feet to 450, and another further neighbor up went from 500 to 650. And then the further neighbor up went to 750. Everybody digs deeper. So, the city needs to deal with this stuff now. I've given you specifics. You have letters on the specifics as to how to deal with these things to get water security now. And then there's long-term water security, which has to do with monitoring wells, reducing well, pulling from the aquifer and allowing the fish to, regenerate in Sulphur Springs and Heath Canyon and, Napa River. So, we can have this really long-term vision for water security, but there's a lot of stuff that has to happen now. And I would really, I would really encourage you to make it happen now and not have these macro long-term visions for water security.
Thank you. thank you for the public comment. Okay, so we've run out of our 15 minutes, but I see one more public comment on there. I hate to ask for more time, but I feel like we have to keep the public comment. I have to give the time for it. Cindy?
Okay. Nancy, I'm going to allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, this will be really quick. I want to say I agree with Mr. Smithies, everything he recommended, but I specifically wanted to thank Councilman Hall for thinking creatively and advocating for dredging that reservoir, which I think should be #1 thing on the city works list to do, because we may find a way to capture more water there. And Councilman Hall, I hope you can get a lot done before you become a more seasoned politician like some of the others on the council right now. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for the public comment. And so with that, if there's no additional council comments, what we'll do is we'll move forward. This is an effort that's all of us together, large and small users, commercial users, residential, non-residential. I think part of our security framework is understanding how we all work together as we move forward. So really appreciate everybody's comments and the input. We'll stay focused and we'll come back with more. I'm seeing our city manager with a comment.
I just want to revisit the Councilmember Hardy's request regarding potential development of an urgency ordinance related to trucking of water outside of city limits. If there's interest in that, we'll work with the city attorney.
Yes.
I'm certainly supportive.
Okay, and I thank you for the feedback on the urgency notations. That's great feedback, and this is the first version of the implementation side of this, so we'll receive your feedback and begin to continue building on this.
It's really excellent, Mr. Presswich, so thank you. Thank you for this work.
Thank you.
So we'll all we'll adjourn now. If we all just move forward, remember, we still have a COVID issue. We still keeping the community focused moving forward, and on these water issues, getting everybody working together. So thank you, everybody.